Arc 10, Chapter 24. The best person. Having leapt out of the window, Natsuki's Subaru dashed behind the caravan where the site of the crash had transpired. There had been no hesitation in his stride, and it could have even been described as gallant. It was the silhouette of a man who believed that helping someone whose life was in danger to be the most natural thing in the world. Russell. Ludicrous. Pulling away as he called out to him, the black-haired companion had passed judgment with no consideration for the consequences, and Russell Fellow could do nothing but see him off with a look of disbelief. That was also because he could not understand what that companion had been thinking. He would have liked to believe that he had thoroughly informed him of the gravity of their actions and exactly what it was they needed to prioritize. But to an even greater extent, Russell, White Sheep, why did you not stop him? In order to make sense of the situation, Russell questioned the true intentions of White Sheep, who had displayed an attempt at gentle persuasion. White Sheep had certainly layered her hands on top of Subaru's. She had uttered the words to hold him back. In spite of that, he did not obey, nay, his heart had not been moved. Russell, you also ought to be keenly aware of what our greatest priority is at the moment. Not even a single second of our time should be squandered on any other purpose. You, White Sheep, did, Russell. What? Knitting his brow at the blurred voice, which he had failed to hearken in certainty, Russell gazed at White Sheep. And facing the window out of which their companion had leapt out, and pulling the hand that had been shaken off by the other party close to her chest, White Sheep glanced back. All the while, large drops of tears had been filling her round, golden eyes. White Sheep, I did. To Subaru-san, I did do it, but the fact that Subaru-san still rushed out means he's just that kind of person. Russell, that kind of? White Sheep, I'm sure I told you as well, Silver Fox. All I am capable of is leveraging feelings that are already present. I cannot make him do something he never would have done. Russell, White Sheep, let us chase after Subaru-san and Beatrice right away. We can also help them with the injured. As White Sheep pleaded out with misty eyes and a tearful voice, Russell brought his hand to his lips. Deep within his narrowed eyes, his divine protection, which ascertained the value of all things in this world, reconstructed the various plans he had assembled, fabricating them anew. He could not see the right answer in itself. Merely, he would locate the option closest to the right answer. Stranger, what's this? What's this? This situation's pretty cheery and even chipper, ain't it? If you're gonna lodge a complaint either way, then speak with actions instead of words. Instead of quibbling with words, you can have a fight to the death if you so please. Q-ha-ha-ha, White Sheep, Black Dog, hick. Black Dog, oh, what's this? What's wrong, that damn face of yours? Don't tell me you've become capable of persuading people with just your tears, not even needing to touch their skin, have you? That'll only work on men, you know, though I'm an exception. Spitting those words, the person who boldly entered the dragon carriage was Black Dog, having taken off his mask and black robes. The man's bare face was now complemented by a black suit, as he contorted his strong, fierce facial features. Black Dog shrugged his shoulders at Russell and White Sheep as they faced him, and messily sat himself down on a nearby seat. Black Dog. So, here I was wondering what we were still doing, dawdling and dilly-dallying, but to think you got your hand bitten by that brat. And this is after I went through such troubles to ensure we'd be able to leave. Don't you go and make others' efforts meaningless. White Sheep, ensuring we would be able to leave. Don't tell me. Black Dog. Oi, quit it, stop that. What's with those eyes? All I did was break a single axle. The big uproar that happened was the doing of the frightened ground dragon. That and this and all of it and everything I did for your sake. Q-ha-ha-ha, I lied. White Sheep. Hick, Silver Fox! White Sheep diverted her gaze away from Black Dog, who was flashing a crude smile while crossing his legs in his seat, and directed her eyes burning with righteous indignation toward Russell. On the receiving end of her sincere ire, Russell lowered the hand he had placed to his mouth. Russell, let us depart. White Sheep, are you serious? As White Sheep widened her eyes in disbelief, Russell affirmed her thoughts. Russell, from the outset, our greatest priority was securing Crush-sama. I had wanted to secure others as well if possible, but with our outstretched hand rejected, it is all for naught. Though it is a shame that by relinquishing Blue Snake, I will no longer be able to test something I had wished to verify. Black Dog, Like I said, didn't I tell you? Didn't I let you know? There wouldn't have been any future troubles if I had just scorched them to crisps in the sewers. Russell, I have no intention of returning to a discussion for which there is no room for argument. Time is of the essence. Deciding on their course of action, Russell turned his back to White Sheep. In that back of his, he had visibly pruned away any excess focus toward their companion who had run off to the crash site. And to that back, White Sheep reached out with a resolved expression. Black Dog, wait, hold off. With those words, a long leg stretched out to block White Sheep's path. As White Sheep bit her lip and glared at that obstruction, Black Dog, sitting boorishly in his seat, waved his hand. Black Dog, didn't you say so yourself? You can't make that guy do what he wouldn't do. White Sheep, but this sort of, Black Dog, so don't you cry about it, it's a pain in the ass. It's not like I'm being careful to keep that piece of shit in a good mood or anything. It's just that maybe you might not even really need to do anything. White Sheep, shrugging his shoulders at White Sheep, whose eyes flickered with a lack of comprehension. Black Dog raised up a hand with his leg still thrown out, and gestured behind the dragon carriage nay, in the direction of the crash site. And then, Black Dog, the nature of the clamor and tumult has shifted. In that case, what becomes of our course of action? Q-ha-ha-ha. Dust and dirt adrift at the crash site, there yet remained the threat of the half-destroyed building collapsing. The ceiling had fallen through, and a person had been injured, impaled by its lumber, and was thus stripped of their consciousness, the wound mortal by anyone's measure. That was, had it not been for him, who remained there continuously applying healing magic. Subaru, Ferris, removing his hood with a single hand, the person who had revealed his face, Ferris, left Subaru bewildered with his presence. Just a little while beforehand, he had been weighing on Subaru's mind. He had gone through a terribly hard time, and yet he had still turned down Subaru's outstretched hand, calling it prideful. So what he was currently doing had been a mystery. Never had Subaru imagined that they would now be in the same group together, with him operating under the name Blue Snake. Ferris, what are you doing? Are you even listening? Subaru, hick. Ferris, don't just stand there while lives are on the line. If people die here, it will be our fault for not being able to rescue them. The shock of this reunion was utterly demolished by the words of none other than Ferris himself. That desperate outcry returned Subaru to his senses, and to follow Ferris's directions from a moment prior. To remove the wooden beam piercing the body of the wounded, he placed Beatrice down on the ground from his embrace. And Subaru. Good to go, Biko. Beatrice. Leave it to me, in fact. Murak. Due to their successive battles at the McMahon residence and the sewers, they were amidst an undesirable interval. Albeit her condition would have been in the worst possible state, Beatrice gave no indication of such whatsoever as she activated her yin magic and lightened the target. Subaru, we're lifting it. You ready? Ferris. Be an idiot if I said I wasn't. Subaru, that's a mouth you got. NGH, GH. Yelling back and forth with Ferris, Subaru carefully raised up the lightened lumber, extracting it from its point of entry into the wounded person's body. An unpleasant sensation and sound it brought forth, causing even greater volumes of blood to spurt out. But the moment it was removed from the open wound, Ferris began to exhibit his true mettle. Ferris, it's all right. I'll make it better now. That instant, overflowing in excess, was an exceedingly kind blue light. Beatrice, incredible laying eyes upon that light, a wordless whisper spilled from the lips of Beatrice. That which made even Beatrice, a great spirit capable of healing magic herself, be so taken aback, comprised the entirety of the reason for Ferris to be dubbed the Blue, and a prodigy beyond all compare. His healing arts were the same as ever. No, very clearly, they had reached miraculous heights far greater than his previous expertise. Subaru. The ones bearing witness to that sight were all the good Samaritans who had rushed onto the scene while prepared for tragedy. Whilst all of their eyes were simultaneously being captivated by that miracle, he understood their feelings. A fatal injury believed to be beyond saving, a deep gash that surely would leave lasting, lifelong effects, and an utterly cruel ending to it all. Everything was painted over by that light. It was a sight that seemed as if it could persist into the world to come as a religious altarpiece. Subaru. Everyone. Evacuate all the injured who can be evacuated and gather them in one place. Prioritize those who have been severely injured and those who got hit on the head. Anyone who can still move on their own, get outside the building. Those who had been stunned by the miracle were pulled back to reality by Subaru's raised voice. Ferris was here. This was a miracle, a jackpot, and that he would utilize to the fullest extent. Subaru, everyone can be saved. We've got the world's greatest healer here. Widening their eyes at the do-or-die spirit in Subaru's voice, they exchanged glances and responded with a reassuring, "Yeah." Thus did they begin the relief effort to save those who had collapsed, and the people whose legs had been trapped beneath the rubble. Ascertaining that, as Subaru wiped the skin by his eye with the back of hand, Subaru. "Ferris, everyone's a go. We'll assist. What should we do?" "Ferris, don't get in the way. Do as I tell you, hold this person down." Subaru. "Man, you dickhead. After this is all over, I'm gonna give you a real piece of my mind. Just you wait." Speaking as if Subaru's persuasion of everyone did not matter to him, Ferris remained entirely focused on the lives at hand, in fact. His rough words aside, Ferris's skills and the accuracy of his judgment were outstanding. Assigning priority to each of the injured by discerning what was most urgent at a single glance, and outputting an applicable level of healing magic, he saved one life after the other. Subaru, a restaurant at dinner time, checks out that tons of people got caught up in it. Finally able to perceive the situation of the damaged site, Subaru spat out saliva mixed with dust. The road was also crowded with dragon carriages, and there would have been a lot of people who had been within the establishment. It would thereby stand to reason that many people would have been injured, but fortunately, there did not appear to be anyone who had died instantly as far as Subaru could see. And if there was nobody who had suffered an instant death, Ferris, "Don't you die, please come back to us." The outpour of convalescent light healed all the wounds imperiling their lives, removing them entirely. Everyone would be saved. That was not just his enthusiasm. It would be brought to fruition as the response in reality for certain, stranger. "Hick! Oi, over there!" Abruptly hearing a voice running counter to that hope of his, Subaru's head snapped up. It was one of the guards helping out with the rescue. His finger pointed toward the half-destroyed restaurant, to the partially crumbled upper floor, barely being held up by a pillar with cracks in it. The roof's support beam was raising its death throes, balancing on a precarious equilibrium as the building's second floor began to tip over. And underneath that, Ferris and the injured still remained, the healing process still underway. Were the upper half of the building to come crashing down, salvation would reach none. Immediately after that thought, Subaru, no, it was not just Subaru who broke into a sprint. Stranger. Hick, the elderly guard, his subordinates, and a townsman who had been assisting in the relief effort had all begun sprinting. Others had also gotten up, raised their bodies, and attempted to take action. With that in his peripheral, Subaru gritted his molars oh so firmly and recklessly cried out, "Subaru. Beatrice! Beatrice. With this, we will seriously be out of gas, in fact." "Murak," by way of Beatrice, as she held both her hands out, the collapsing part of the building was enveloped in a faint purple light. Ruefully so, as per the universal laws of gravity, even supposing weight were to be changed, the falling speed of the wreckage and the peril it presented would not abate. Its mass was of such dimension that the eventual result would be the same. Therein, he would interpose himself. "Subaru, Enga." Having just barely made it in time underneath the wreckage, Subaru took on a pose to support the falling rubble as if having been caught in a suspended ceiling trap. By himself, it would have been impossible for Subaru. The guards who had sprinted together entered underneath the rubble a moment later, all supporting it in a united effort. "Subaru, K-Guy, right now, before it's too late, get the people underneath out." Feeling as if he would cough up blood, Subaru exclaimed the collective will of everyone supporting the wreckage. And hearkening that, those who had been delayed in their start began pulling Ferris and the injured people out from below. Until all were evacuated, this had to be endured by any means necessary. Indeed, as Subaru roused himself, stranger, "Though you're always shouting in a loud voice, aren't you now, kiddo?" Subaru, "Ah, wait, you're..." While exerting his utmost strength to brace himself, Subaru was shocked upon noticing the person supporting the same wreckage beside him. It was a face he knew, the owner of a fruit stand in the royal capital with whom his destiny often intertwined, Kadaman. Subaru. Widening his eyes at that unexpected reunion, Subaru simultaneously felt a sense of panic. The efficacy of the cognitive disruption robe was not all-powerful. He had immediately infringed on the warning provided by Russell. For Kadaman, who knew Subaru, his identity had been exposed by asserting himself here. However, Kadaman, don't make that sort of face. The fact you're helping people here, kiddo, is the truth about you that I've seen with my own 2 eyes. Upon those words, Subaru almost unwittingly let the strength slip from his arms. Because of that, Kadaman and the others cried out, "Enwo!" at the increased load, so he hurried to carry his weight once more. He was shocked. He thought that once his identity was exposed, it would all be over. But he was glad he had come back. "Subaru, everybody's out. All right, everyone, on the count of 3, we'll raise it up in a banzai. Drop it inside." Gritting his teeth in endurance to the point that his molars were creaking, everyone cried out 1, 2, and 3. In unison. The wreckage they threw onto the ground with their full-force banzai was nearly the entirety of what had been above the 2nd floor of the building. As soon as it left the hands of everyone, the efficacy of the magic was lost, and it regained its original destructive weight. "Subaru, get out, 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 get out." An explosive, weighty sound of destruction echoed to their backs, and the group who had been supporting the wreckage evacuated with all their might. As if tumbling, Subaru fled from that which had felt almost murderous and rolled over. Rolling like that, he sprawled out onto the ground and gazed up towards the dust-clouded heavens. Subaru. "Ha ha, and no part of me got crushed, did it? Kadaman, relax, everything's fine, ain't it? We got the greatest healer in the world here, don't we? Subaru. Even if it can be healed, I don't want to see any of my limbs torn off." Besides Subaru, as he raised his voice, Kadaman, having also rolled away, laughed, that's for sure. Such laughter could also be heard from the others around them, and it seemed like the unit who had held up the wreckage had all made it out all right. For now, they had somewhat managed to complete a single difficult task, but they must not get ahead of themselves. "Subaru, Ferris is still exerting his efforts all by himself. I've got to go help, Beatrice. That might be a bit difficult, I suppose." Forcing his slackened body up, Subaru turned to face that voice with an awe. The owner of the voice had been Beatrice, and Subaru immediately understood why it had contained a feeling of tension. On the street outside the restaurant where the accident had occurred, all injured individuals had been carried out. In the center of them all, Ferris was still endeavoring to heal their wounds, and yet, stranger. First night to the treacherous Crush Karsten, the blue Felix Argyle. There is an active subpoena for you to present yourself to the royal castle. At once, you shall abide by these orders. After all, a company of knights had encircled Ferris, holding him at the ends of their swords in an act of intimidation. Ferris, the company of roughly 30 knights, all were clad in white uniforms demonstrating their affiliation with the royal guard. Bearing witness to that sight, one that went against all reason, a white void was birthed in Subaru's mind. Just before the site of an accident, would a patrol of knights really turn their swords against a healer engaged in relief efforts? Impossible. Kadaman, idio, what the hell are you saying? Orders? Look at the situation. Elderly guard. That's right, that person is treating the wounded. If he wasn't here, knight. Your protests shall not be acknowledged. This, too, is a matter of utmost importance for the royal capital. The guards here remain responsible for dealing with the accident. Us knights shall fulfill our duty. In Subaru's stead, Kadaman and the elderly guard raised their voices in protest to that abnormality. But they were drowned out by the deafening bellow of the long-haired commanding officer of the night squadron. During the momentary lapse yielded as a result of that, the commanding officer turned a sharp glare toward Ferris, toward the back of he who had not even given a single glance in the direction of the squadron of knights, while continuing to cast healing magic, Knight. These are orders. Cease your operations, Knight Felix. Along with your master, you are an individual suspected of harboring treasonous intentions against the kingdom, so how could you possibly be trusted to carry out medical care? You might very well be doing something to those undergoing treatment. Subaru. Hick, don't fucking joke around. That instant, at the unforgivable comments hurled toward Ferris, Subaru exploded. Rushing into the midst of the scene without thinking, Subaru wedged his way between Ferris's back and the company of knights. Then, glaring at the knights brandishing their swords, nay, at those who could hardly be called knights, Subaru. Just what feelings do you all fucking think motivated Ferris to refine his skills in healing magic? Do you think it was just talent? It's obviously because he wanted to save people. Knight. Subaru. You're saying you don't know what Ferris will do to the people who got injured. Of course you fucking know. It's healing. Saving lives. He's rescuing the people who seem like they might die even now. It's the most obvious thing to anybody with a pair of eyes. He's clearly just doing what the best person here would do, to the point that nobody could do better if they tried. Shouting himself hoarse, eyes running bloodshot, Subaru howled, questioning why they failed to understand something so simple. To the extent it was unbelievable that he had used up all of his bodily strength just a moment prior. He gestured with his whole body, exploding with completely reasonable emotions, and fixing his gaze on each and every one of the knights' faces as he poured out his very soul. Cataman, Kiddo watching over Subaru's indignant outburst, Cataman softly muttered so. For him, the gate guards, and everyone else present at the crash site, it was something that had gone without saying. Thus, among the squadron of knights too, hesitation began to emerge in some of their eyes and faces, and the tips of some of their swords here and there could be seen wavering. But those honestly wavering emotions, Knight, look at who we have here, if it isn't the traitor's accomplice, Natsuki Subaru, were completely suppressed by a single line from the commanding officer of the Knight Squadron, his eyes clouded in hatred. As soon as the commanding officer vocalized the name Natsuki Subaru, the knights blinked their eyes several times over and correctly perceived the presence of Subaru standing before them. The cognitive disruption had been overcome. Thus, once they understood that the person who had spoken such plausible things was a wanted fugitive, the hesitation of the knights was brushed aside by their sense of duty. And just like before, no, to an even greater degree, an air of tension was born. Beatrice, Subaru. His identity exposed, Beatrice nestled close to Subaru and clenched his hand as the swords were pointed to him. But, with them having used up all their mana during the collapse of the building, they now lacked any means by which to tide this encounter over. Subaru, at best, I guess I could pummel the leader's face with invisible providence. Huh, my bad, Ferris. Looks like I just added fuel to the fire. Ferris, shut up. I wasn't expecting anything anyway. Subaru, tahaha. Ferris, but you're a skilled talker, aren't you? Keep saying ridiculous things and stretch this out to the utmost limit. Even if it's just a single person more, I'll save as many people as possible. Without looking back at each other, they exchanged such words with their backs turned, and as a wry smile came over Subaru's face at Ferris's bitter proclamation of his innermost heart, he steeled his resolve. The opponent desired information on Crush. Thus, they would not be killed here. In that case, eloquently and skillfully, while having lost the ability to wield magic, Natsuki Subaru's battle would. Knight, we are sufficiently aware of just how dangerous you can be, no, of how dangerous you are. In order to save the kingdom from needless disorder, Natsuki Subaru, here you shall be. Subaru, hey, hold on. You're way overestimating me. To begin with, something like treason. Knight, silence. All is for the sake of the kingdom. That talkative mouth of yours I shall stranger. A wind of deceit is blowing around you. That instant, a dignified gust of wind swept through. Stranger, Ferris. Ferris, yes. Stranger, treat all of the wounded. Ensure that all shall be able to return to their previous lives without any grave incident. Ferris, even if you didn't tell me, that was what I had intended. Stranger, I see, then it is fine. I shall provision the time for you to do so. They did not exchange many words. However, that was enough for the two of them. For those two, who both knew the capabilities of the other better than they did, that was enough. Subaru, the golden hue of the dragon eye painted a streak of light through the air with its radiance, making fools of the squad of knights through nimble movements. The knights spread out in order to avoid striking each other, displaying a high level of coordination, but, stranger, I perceive it. The storm of swords closed in on her, and ought to have left no openings, but by thrusting the tip of her slender sword into an opening the size of a needle's eye, a path was forced open by the Valkyrie by Crush, whose blades shimmer capered, dispossessing the knights of their own swords. Crying out in pain, the knights clutched their arms as they fell back, all having received shallow cuts to the base of their wrists or fingers, causing them to withdraw by stripping them of their ability to continue fighting. That was the non-lethal sword that would not pilfer life in vain, and just as he thought so, Crush, are the lot of you real? Are you fakes? Knights, hic. Crush, the two on the sides are fine, the one who has fallen back to the center, you are vile. There is no escape. Directly following the heartless verdict, the knight who had fallen back held up his non-sword-wielding hand toward Crush, and in that moment, signs of magic being invoked began to distort the atmosphere. However, Beatrice, it is no use, in fact. As Beatrice muttered from the side, her words were verified by the flash of Crush's blade, a special technique that would dice the magic apart before invocation, which thus showered the wide-eyed knight in the severing light of an oblique slash, felling him to the ground. For a moment, Subaru had been about to call out words to hold her back, but looking at things carefully while understanding the situation, it was clear that Crush had a clear basis for the mercy and the lack thereof that she dished out. Intermixed amidst the company of knights were those whose intent had been to subdue Crush, and those who harbored clear intent to kill her. And until now, the ones whom Crush had cut down had entirely belonged to the latter category. Likewise, in the reckless behavior of the commanding officer of these knights, there had clearly been the influence of a certain someone, of Capella. Thus, the influence of that horrid authority was something that could be discerned by Crush's divine protection with precision. Subaru, moreover, if I'm not mistaken, she's gotten stronger than she was in the mansion. Beatrice, you're not mistaken, I suppose. She has acquired a greater command over her eye compared to then. In fact, swinging her sword bereft of futility, bereft of mercy, and bereft of play, Crush classified whom among the squad of knights had been influenced by Capella, and those who had not, further selecting even the means by which she felled them, therefore demonstrating exceedingly preeminent swordsmanship as she did battle. She was getting increasingly familiar with her dragon eye. As for what that signified, he remained unable to wholeheartedly rejoice. Ferris, hic, that's everyone, all done. As Crush continued to hack and slash her foes down, she succeeded in buying Ferris enough time to finish healing everyone. Sweat on his brow, Ferris attempted to stand up on the spot. His body staggered, and he was about to topple when Subaru promptly reached a hand out to support him. Then, taking Ferris's slender body in his arm, he kept the former in a firm hold by lending him a shoulder. Ferris, you sure don't let any opportunity to shine go by, do you now, Subaru-kun? Subaru, don't say it as if I was just waiting for an opportunity. Man, you're the absolute coolest, you know. Ferris, your voice is loud. Try to prop me up better. It feels like I might collapse. Subaru, you complain too much. But Crush-san, Ferris had accomplished his job. It was thus time for Crush to also withdraw from her battle against the knights. To be honest, with her strength, it might have also been possible to break through this encirclement head-on, but Beatrice, if she falls asleep halfway through again, it will spell the end for certain this time, I suppose. Subaru, actually, that's what I'm scared of. Crush-san, tell me you've got some sort of countermeasure. Crush, regrettably, I lack anything of the sort. Subaru, hi. Crush, ergo, I have arranged for it. Black Dog. Just when he believed their hopes extinguished, Crush called out a name far too dangerous to place their hopes in. Immediately after Subaru, Beatrice, and Ferris all reacted ujie to that vocalization. Black Dog. Kiwahahaha. Don't hate me like that, don't love me like that. It's showtime for the headliner. A cackling voice that gave rise to unpleasant feelings to any who heard it echoed far and wide, causing the knights and those in the environs, all of whom completely unfamiliar with the voice, to look around the vicinity in shock. However, the proprietor of the laughing voice was nowhere to be found. Instead, what blanketed their vision was a tremendous quantity of black smoke. Crush, a smokescreen. There is no harm. Amidst the voices of shock and confusion rising up at the black smoke, Crushy's voice informed them so as she ran over. However, though he was not suspicious of Crush, if this was the work of Black Dog, his apprehension would win out. Ferris, it's all right, I think. If not, me and Subaru-kun would end up being left behind here again, right? Subaru. You're right about that. Got it. Then right now, from here, invisible Providence. That moment, as Subaru nodded in agreement to Ferris's comment, an invisible black magic hand emerged from his chest, and driving through the black smoke, it slammed into the face of the Night Squadron's commanding officer, who had been attempting to charge toward them. The commanding officer's nose erupted with blood as he exclaimed, "Ka!" falling over on his back. Glancing at that, Crush, that person was fine. Subaru, you're kidding. He wasn't someone who's been replaced. Crush, I sensed he harbored a strong ire and hatred toward you. Ferris, it's Knight Zial, right? He was in the castle at the time of the royal selection. Isn't that why? Subaru. Enough, please just settle on a single rating for that episode already. Whether it served as proof of Subaru's innocence, or as the reason for him being targeted, the ratings were all over the place. Setting aside that lamentation of his, disappearing into the black smoke screen, Subaru and the gang escaped the situation. Behind them, several members of the company of knights attempted to follow after, but Cataman, I won't let you chase after the kiddo and the rest. After all, I don't like the way you knights have conducted yourselves today one bit. Standing in the way to obstruct their path was Cataman and the gate guards. At that unexpected assist, Subaru called out "Unk" in surprise, to which Cataman smiled. Cataman, go on then, kiddo, I'll be cheering for you. You and Emilia-sama both. Subaru, hick. I'll be coming back to collect your honest vote. Hearing that encouragement from Cataman, who had acknowledged Natsuki Subaru as Emilia's knight, Subaru responded while on the verge of tears, and exerted strength in his legs to cross into the black smoke once more. As he went off, the angered bellows of the squadron of knights and the ardor of the gate guardians defying them all flared up in a large uproar. Elderly guard. Inspections finished. Let 'em pass, you knights, and let us guards do our jobs. Stranger. Yo, so you're back. I thought you'd die for sure. Subaru. Chin, man, to think you were such a useless guy to have as an ally after Subaru and company made it out of the enshrouding black smoke which had permitted their escape. Ratchins had been waving at them as they rushed to board the dragon carriage waiting outside the gate, welcoming the four of them. With there having been such an uproar, Subaru was shocked at Ratchins's apparent heartlessness, as he had not shown any willingness to take action. Subaru, do you not have a human heart? Are you a witch cultist? Ratchins. Don't fucking cast suspicions on people like that. Saying I didn't do anything's also a false accusation. I handled all the negotiations for you. Ain't that right, Duchess-san? Ratchins stuck out his tongue and cued Crush to weigh in. At that addressment, Crush, her eye patch reaffixed over her left eye, nodded a "that is correct." Crush. Ratchins Hoffman does have a way with words. In fact, it was he who enabled negotiations to take place. Subaru, negotiations. That be, stranger. Of course, that would be with us, Natsuki Dono. At the voice that felt somewhat like a surprise attack, Subaru and Beatrice's shoulders jumped with a pio. The proprietor of the voice was none other than Russell, who had entered the dragon carriage a bit later than Subaru and the rest. Accompanied by White Sheep and Black Dog, he shut the door to the dragon carriage and signaled to the coachman to depart. Instantly, the dragon carriage began to move, transforming it into an inescapable post-mortem meeting room. Russell, first of all, the fact that everyone returned safely is the most optimal outcome for our course of action. Of course, it was merely the result of having been blessed with good fortune, and I harbor many reservations, but Blue Snake. Ferris. Russell, you were the one to append the condition of keeping your presence among us hidden. If you take such actions regardless of that, it becomes impossible to keep it a secret. You shall not proclaim it a fault on our part, correct? Ferris, I understand. I won't call it a breach of our conditions. This isn't the place for me to speak on my personal interests either. Being the first one to whom Russell had spoken out, Ferris glanced toward Crush from the corner of his eye. However, even though Crush had likely noticed his gaze, she gave no reaction in Ferris's direction. The atmosphere adrift between the two of them was something extremely complex. And so, Subaru, what should we do, Biko? Might I be able to do a good job of churning the atmosphere, I wonder? Should I give it a try? Beatrice, for now you should hold off, in fact. This is a scene for us to sit back and observe, I suppose. More importantly, Russell, Natsuki Dono from here on, please refrain from taking such actions. Subaru, I guess you're mad at me, right? He cautiously examined Russell's expression, but perhaps to be expected, the head of an intelligence agency was unreadable. Russell's expression was a calm sea of emotion, but there was no way that he was not angry with Subaru, who had directly disobeyed his orders and rushed onto the scene. This face was something he ought to count as indignation. Russell, I am not mad, just disappointed. After all, I believe I had thoroughly instilled exactly what ought to be prioritized. If not for Crush-sama's comments, I would not have risked remaining in that place. Subaru, Crush-san's words. Those would be, Crush. It is nothing extraordinary. As the situation stands, I have no intention of placing my trust in anybody here other than Natsuki Subaru. Without you here, I would refuse to cooperate with the likes of the Six Tongues. Subaru, that's an extreme honor, but depending on how it was interpreted, that assessment could be a rather extreme one, and thus, Subaru fervently took mind of the surrounding gazes, in particular, that of Russell, who'd had an unnecessary condition levied upon him, and Ferris, who bore quite a complex relationship. But then again, Russell's expression remained unchanged, and Ferris, due to exhaustion, remained seated while averting his face. Regardless, the Six Tongues could not afford to relinquish Crush, so it was due to her opinion that they had been unable to abandon Subaru, Beatrice, and Ferris after they had gone back to the crash site. Subaru, but this would mean Russell-san. Russell, what is it? If your mind has changed over the course of this incident. Subaru, rather than my mind per se, this is just a hypothetical, but if something like this were to happen again, I think Ferris and I probably wouldn't be able to leave it alone. Hence, I have a request. Russell, let us hear it. Subaru, from here on out, I'd like to go with strategies that, well, cause as little harm to others as possible. Is that no good? Russell slightly widened his eyes at that plea, and behind him, Black Dog laughed a kuha. He was aware that he was saying something unreasonable, but as a matter of fact, nobody had died during the incident on this occasion. It would be difficult when it came to dealing with those whom Capella had gotten her hands on, but they should still be able to oppose that to the very end. As Subaru thought so, before Russell could even say anything, White Sheep. And me too. I also think that Subaru-san's way of doing things is good. Crush. There is nothing more ideal than concluding things with minimal casualties. Of course, I believe that we ought to follow a certain order of priority in order to get things done, but lives rank quite highly in my personal order of precedence. White Sheep and Crush were in agreement with Subaru's opinion, and there was also no way that Ferris would object. Black Dog's sneer went without saying, but surprisingly, Ratchin snorted his nose but did not repudiate it. And, as a matter of course, Subaru's like-minded best partner was Beatrice. Of course, Betty's view is the same as Subaru's, in fact. After all, Subaru has always silenced everyone by recklessly doing the impossible, I suppose. This time shall be no different, in fact. Subaru, you're sorta making me sound like a terrible troublemaker, but thank you. Articulating so with a smile, Subaru hugged Beatrice by his lap and plumped himself down into his seat. He was to the left of Ferris, who had sat down before him. Then, on his other side, Crush took her seat. Sandwiching Subaru and Beatrice, Crush and Ferris had aligned themselves to his sides. Subaru, shit. I picked the wrong seat. I guess I'll just move. Ferris, hey, Subaru-kun. Could you pass a message to the person by your side? That strange power might place an unexpected burden on your body, so it would be best not to over-rely on it, K. Subaru. No, Crush. Natsuki Subaru, pass the following message on to the individual by your side. It is likely that I will once more fall asleep for a short while. If you are concerned regarding my body, you are free to inspect it whilst I am slumbering. That is all. Subaru. Come on, does that really need to go through me? Let's all just speak honestly. Both of you seem like you can talk. However, neither Ferris, who rested his chin in his hands as he looked to the day after tomorrow, nor Crush, who shut her eyes as she folded her arms, were willing to lend an ear to Subaru's cries. Although it was extremely reassuring and joyous that Crush and Ferris were both part of the promising ensemble to save this kingdom, the pattern of their relationship was not yet ready to openly express their gratitude. Subaru, the road ahead will be fraught with difficulties. As he slumped his shoulders, crestfallen, he placed his chin on the head of Beatrice in his lap. While Beatrice felt that weight, she began to pat Subaru's head from below without reservation. The battle to save Emilia, to save his comrades carving their own path, and to save the kingdom of Lugunica all in one go, commenced. A battle that would surely be no less rigorous than any that had come before. Indeed, in the background of that strong resolve and determination dawned by Natsuki Subaru, while gazing out at the shrinking sight of the royal capital, Russell. You hadn't written about anything of this sort in your letters, Roswal. Did you not provide the necessary nightly training to ensure Emilia-sama would prevail, as per your desires? Thus grumbled the man of the intelligence agency, forced to deal with a responsibility outside the scope of his calculations, utterly stunned as he was.